The evil hidden in ordinary people. Rousseau's dark truth. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. Have you ever looked into the eyes of someone you trust, someone you love, and suddenly felt the uncanny sense that they were hiding something darker than even they were aware of? That behind their politeness, their small talk, their smiles, there lurked a quiet hunger for control, for superiority, for something unspoken. And even more disturbingly, have you ever seen that same flicker in yourself? Today we're going to explore a truth so unsettling, it's almost unbearable. A truth French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau hinted at centuries ago, and yet it remains buried beneath layers of social niceties. The idea that civilization doesn't purify human nature, it corrupts it. That the evil we fear in criminals, tyrants, or monsters isn't foreign to us, it lives in us. Not in the shadows of society, but in the hearts of ordinary people. People like you, people like me. Rousseau didn't believe we were born evil. In fact, quite the opposite. He believed we were born good, peaceful, simple, in harmony with nature. But the moment we began to form societies, to label, to compare, to envy, to compete, we began to mutate. We became something else, something artificial. And Rousseau's terrifying insight was that this artificial version of ourselves, the one shaped by social approval and ego, is not just a departure from our nature, it's a breeding ground for hidden evil. Not the loud, obvious kind, but the quiet, smiling, well-mannered kind that passes unnoticed. And here's the part that makes this personal. Rousseau was talking about you and me. He was talking about the subtle ways we betray others for status, the ways we manipulate while pretending to be kind, the ways we conform not out of virtue but out of fear, the way we wear masks that eventually grow into our faces. What if the real danger isn't that evil people exist somewhere out there, but that the structure of modern life requires us to become them? Let's break this down. Think about how society rewards behavior. We are praised for politeness, for success, for composure, for ambition. But what gets buried beneath those traits? Politeness often hides resentment. Success often emerges from stepping over others. Composure can be a mask for emotional suppression. Ambition can be a socially acceptable form of greed. And most people never question this because society doesn't reward authenticity, it rewards performance. So we learn to perform. We smile when we're angry. We compliment when we feel envy. We obey when we disagree. And slowly, we forget who we were before we learn to play the game. Rousseau called this process amor propria, kind of self-love that depends entirely on how others see us. It's not about being good. It's about looking good. And in that desperate pursuit of approval, we lose the ability to feel deeply, to act freely, to be real. We become hollow. And into that hollowness creeps something sinister.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Because when you're hollow, you need something to fill the void. And that's where the hidden evil begins. Not with hatred, but with insecurity. With the quiet belief that you are not enough. That you must become someone else to be loved. That you must win, impress, outperform. This is where envy is born. Where manipulation begins, where cruelty is justified not as cruelty, but as necessity. We call it just doing what needs to be done, just playing the game. But deep down, we know, we feel the dissonance, and instead of facing it, we double down on the mask. This is what makes the evil in ordinary people so dangerous. It hides behind good intentions. It cloaks itself in virtue. It emerges not in extremes, but in increments. In the friend who gossips under the guise of concern, in the coworker who sabotages with a smile, in the parent who controls in the name of love, in the stranger who walks past suffering with indifference. Evil doesn't always shout. Often it whispers. It blends in. It becomes normal. Is it possible that the very systems we rely on, schools, governments, corporations, don't just tolerate this kind of behavior, but depend on it? That your ability to succeed in the modern world is directly tied to how well you hide your darker impulses behind a socially acceptable mask? And if so, what does that say about the world we've built? What does it say about us? Let me ask you something even deeper. When was the last time you did something right that didn't make you feel more true, but more hollow? When was the last time you acted out of fear of judgment, not out of conviction? How often do you censor your real thoughts because you're afraid of losing your place in the group? Rousseau believed that this loss of inner integrity is the root of all human suffering. That we are not evil by nature but by design. That society, in trying to perfect us, has made us false. And in that falsehood, evil finds room to grow. So where do we go from here? How do we confront the evil we've been trained to ignore? How do we reclaim the parts of ourselves that have been buried under performance and polish? That's where we're headed next. Because if Rousseau's dark truth is real, then unmasking ourselves, however painful, is the only way to become whole again. The cult of comparison, how society manufactures envy, shame, and quiet cruelty. Imagine waking up in the morning and before you've even had a conscious thought of your own, your mind is already comparing. You look at your phone and see someone more successful, more attractive, more admired. Your brain, almost reflexively, registers your inferiority. You tell yourself it's just a fleeting feeling, something to brush off. But it isn't. It's a seed. And over time, seeds like this sprout into something far more insidious than dissatisfaction. They grow into envy, shame, and eventually cruelty. Not the overt kind, the subtle kind. The kind that Rousseau warned us about. The kind that becomes normalized in a society obsessed with appearances. Here's the hard truth. Modern society doesn't just tolerate comparison, it runs on it. Everything is measured, ranked, displayed. Likes, followers, salaries, grades, titles, homes, vacations. We are conditioned to evaluate our worth based not on who we are, but on how we stack up against people we often don't even know. Rousseau saw this centuries ago. He said that the moment we began to live among others, to care about their judgment, a fracture occurred inside us. We split into two selves, the authentic one and the performative one. And the more we compare, the more we feed the performative self until the authentic one is starved of air. Comparison isn't just a social phenomenon, it's a philosophical one. It changes how we define self. We stop asking, "Who am I?" and start asking, "How do I appear?" And once that becomes your lens, you are no longer living your life, you are managing your image. Envy takes root, but not the loud, aggressive envy we're taught to recognize. A quieter kind, the kind that smiles on the outside and simmers on the inside. The kind that celebrates someone's success publicly while secretly hoping for their failure. The kind that keeps you scrolling, not to be inspired, but to find someone doing worse than you just to feel okay. This is the cult of comparison. And like all cults, it demands sacrifices. It demands your authenticity. It demands your peace. It demands your ability to celebrate others without feeling smaller. And in return, it offers you a lie. That if you just perform well enough, if you just rise high enough, you'll finally feel whole. But you don't, because the goalposts keep moving. And the only thing that grows is the gap between who you are and who you pretend to be. And here's where the cruelty comes in. When you live in constant comparison, you start to see others not as people, but as threats. Their success becomes your loss. Their beauty, your shame. Their joy, your reminder of what you lack. And in that mindset, it becomes easier to judge, to gossip, to dismiss, to dehumanize. Not because you're evil, but because you're hurting. And when we don't know how to process that quiet pain, we project it. We mask it with sarcasm, detachment, or superiority. We weaponize our intellect, our humor, our silence. We become passive-aggressive, emotionally distant, subtly cruel. And all the while, we tell ourselves we're just being realistic or honest or protecting our energy. But let me ask you something. How many of your judgments are really just disguised insecurity? How many of your rejections of others are really rejections of the parts of yourself you haven't faced? Rousseau believed that society teaches us to despise what is raw and natural because it cannot be controlled. And so we learn to hate the parts of others that remind us of what we've lost in ourselves. Spontaneity, vulnerability, freedom. In a world where everyone is silently competing, vulnerability becomes dangerous. And so we armor up, we hide, we perform, and we quietly perpetuate the cruelty that wounded us in the first place. The most dangerous part of all this? We don't even see it, because it's not dramatic, it's not criminal, it's ordinary, it's small. It's found in the comments section, the casual joke, the cold glance, the polite distance. It's evil in its most camouflaged form, hidden behind culture, etiquette, ambition. And if we never stop to investigate it, to trace it back to its roots in comparison and shame, we carry it forward. We become the very thing we fear, agents of quiet harm in the name of personal survival. So what's the exit? It begins with awareness, with radical self-honesty, with asking the questions we're trained to avoid. Who am I without the performance? Who am I without the comparison? Can I love others without needing to feel better than them? Until we face these questions head on, we stay trapped in the cult, smiling, achieving, and slowly losing ourselves. The lie of progress, why civilization rewards the mask and punishes the soul. We've been taught a lie so deep, so embedded in the structure of our lives, that questioning it feels almost blasphemous. It's the lie of progress, the belief that civilization is synonymous with improvement, that every step toward complexity is a step toward truth, that urbanity, technology, and refinement are the pinnacle of human development. But what if that very belief is the mechanism by which we are quietly stripped of our essence? What if, as Rousseau argued, the further we move from nature, the further we drift from ourselves? Let's think about what civilization actually rewards. It rewards conformity. It rewards efficiency. It rewards predictability, productivity, and control. These are not human values, they are system values. And while they make society run smoother, they come at a cost that few of us are willing to name: the erosion of the soul. Because the soul is not efficient. It is not polished. It is not marketable. The soul is chaotic, emotional, inconsistent. It is full of contradiction. And in a world optimized for performance, the soul becomes a liability. So we mask it. We learn to present a version of ourselves that is palatable, professional, likable. We edit our thoughts before we speak. We shrink our emotions into emojis. We exchange depth for clarity, nuance for speed. And we call this growing up. But what if it's not maturity we're developing, but compliance? What if civilization doesn't elevate us, it disciplines us? What if, in the name of progress, we have become obedient shells of who we were meant to be? Rousseau believed that the more civilized we become, the more we are judged not by what we are, but by how we appear. And that shift is devastating, because it means that integrity becomes less important than image. That truth becomes less valuable than branding. That goodness becomes performative rather than lived. And in that world, the mask is rewarded, while the soul is punished. Every time you choose to suppress your instinct in favor of what is socially acceptable, you are praised. Every time you share something raw, unfiltered, or inconvenient, you are sidelined. Bit by bit, the soul learns that being itself is dangerous. This is the silent tragedy of modern life. We are surrounded by people, smart, talented, well-intentioned people who have no idea who they are anymore. Not because they're lost, but because they've been trained out of themselves. Trained to be adaptable, trained to be presentable, trained to be marketable, but never trained to be real. And if you've ever felt that strange, aching emptiness after achieving something you thought would fulfill you, that's why. Because it wasn't your soul that succeeded, it was your mask. And your soul knows the difference. Let me ask you something brutal. When was the last time you did something solely because it felt right? Not because it made sense, not because it would look good, not because it would help you climb. How often do you choose truth over comfort? How often do you let yourself be seen without the armor of performance? The fact that these questions feel risky to answer is proof of how deep the system runs. We live in a world where authenticity has become rebellion. And yet, the lie of progress persists. We are told we are freer than ever, that we have more choices, more tools, more access. But freedom without self-knowledge is just another form of slavery. If you don't know who you are, your choices are just reactions. Your actions are just echoes. And your life becomes a carefully curated advertisement for the person you think you're supposed to be. Rousseau saw this with painful clarity. He knew that civilization creates a mirror and teaches us to live in it. But mirrors are not windows. They reflect, but they do not reveal. So what do we do in a world that rewards masks and punishes depth? We begin by choosing depth anyway. We begin by speaking the hard truths, even when they cost you a social capital. We begin by reconnecting with what is wild, messy, and unbranded within us. We begin by resisting the seduction of polish and choosing the power of presence, not because it's easy, but because it's the only way to remember who we were before the world told us who to be. The return to the wild self-healing the soul Rousseau warned us we'd lose if everything Rousseau warned us about is true, and deep down, we know it is. Then the way forward is not through more refinement, more progress, more performance. It's through return. A return to something we've forgotten but never fully lost. A return to the wild self. Not the chaotic, destructive wildness that society fears, but the original self, the unfiltered, undivided self that existed before we were taught to be afraid of who we are. That's the self Rousseau was trying to protect. And if we want to heal, we have to find our way back to it. But how do we return to something that's been buried under decades of conditioning? We begin by becoming still. We begin by noticing how much of our day is spent in reacting to expectations, to social roles, to ideas of success that were never really ours. We listen to the quiet voice beneath the noise, the one that's been whispering all along. Sometimes it sounds like longing, sometimes like grief, sometimes like a wild, irrational impulse to do something that makes no sense but feels true. That voice is not madness, it's memory, and we must learn to trust it again. To return to the wild self means to step outside the structures that keep us compliant. Not physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. It means to question why we do what we do, why we chase the things we chase, why we silence parts of ourselves for the comfort of others. It means to stop asking, "What will people think?" and start asking, "What do I know to be real?" And that shift, that one question, breaks a spell, because it moves you from being a mirror to being a flame. And a flame doesn't ask for permission to burn. Here's a truth that's hard to swallow. The wild self will cost you. It will cost you approval. It will cost you comfort. It will cost you your image. But it will give you something far more precious. It will give you yourself. Not the self you perform, the self you are. The one that laughs too loud, that cries at inconvenient times, at dreams beyond the boundaries of logic. The one that feels deeply, loves recklessly, and dares to live without shame. That self is not your weakness, it's your origin. And returning to it isn't regression, it's resurrection. But be warned, the world will not celebrate your return. Because your authenticity threatens its illusions. When you live without a mask, you expose everyone else who is still hiding, and many will resent you for that. But some will see you and remember something they'd forgotten. Your courage will give them permission. Your truth will become a mirror for their own. And in that way, your healing becomes a quiet revolution. So let me ask you one final question. What would your life look like if you stopped pretending, if you stopped performing, if you stopped living as a character in a play written by people who don't know your soul? What if you chose instead to live as the person you were before the world told you who to be? Rousseau believed that to return to our natural self was not to abandon society, but to redeem it. Because only when individuals reclaim their inner truth can any collective become just, whole, and free. The evil hidden in ordinary people is not an inescapable curse, it's a symptom of forgetting. Forgetting who we are, forgetting how to feel, forgetting how to live without fear. But we can remember, and when we do, we don't just heal ourselves, we light a path for others to follow. The wild self is waiting, not in some distant future, not in some perfect moment, but now beneath the noise, beneath the mask, beneath the fear. It has always been there, and it always will be. All you have to do is return.